Welcome back to the deep dive. For this particular deep dive, you've given us something wonderfully unique and personal. We're taking a close look at an ongoing project you've been pursuing, centered around the intersection of lucid dreaming and, well, one of the most beloved characters from Star Trek, Commander Data.
That's right. The source material you've provided, it's a collection of excerpts, basically, compiled from different moments over time, where you've discussed this goal on your time travel film podcast.
Right?
It's essentially an evolving audio diary of this specific dream endeavor.
Like pulling out all the data-related bits from the podcast's history.
Yeah. And the core context behind all this, briefly touched upon in the sources and reiterated in one of the files, is your admiration for Data. Yeah, the android striving so earnestly to understand humanity.
And this whole ambitious project, it actually sprouted from what began as just a simple thought experiment.
Exactly, a thought experiment about how Data, a purely logical machine, how would he actually learn a complex 21st century computer skill? Specifically, the text editor Vim, which is, well, notorious.
Oh, yeah, even among experienced users, it's got an incredibly steep, often counterintuitive learning curve.
Right, so the fundamental question you were wrestling with was this. Given Data's machine nature, his ability to process information at lightning speed, maybe even directly interface with computers, would he instantly grasp something like Vim, or would the deeply human, almost muscle memory-driven, and sometimes, frankly, frustrating nuances of mastering Vim pose a unique challenge, maybe highlighting a gap in his understanding of how humans interact with tech? He can literally plug his brain in, right? But could he navigate Vim commands? That's the core of it.
It's such a specific, brilliant question. And initially, you even posed this scenario to AI, right? Wondering how they might simulate Data's learning process.
But that exploration then sparked the idea for this dream project.
Yeah, seeing the lucid dream state as perhaps the closest possible way, as you put it, to actually get an answer, to run this simulation yourself.
And to directly interact with this character you find so compelling.
And what's particularly fascinating is your perspective on this whole process. You're not just trying to teach Data, you're also using it as a way to explore your own mind.
Right. Viewing dreams themselves as a biological form of AI, you said, or a type of generative model running internally.
It's like your own personal holodeck simulation. It really is.
So our mission for this deep dive, pulling from the stories and reflections in the sources you've shared, is to really focus on the actual dream experiences you've recounted. We'll explore the specific encounters you've had with Data, the attempts you've made towards this ambitious goal, and the unexpected, sometimes really bizarre things you've learned along the way. And we'll draw on that initial context where it helps sort of illuminate the dream details.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump right into the narrative of this project then. Unpacking the journey, maybe starting with some of the earliest mentions and initial experiences you shared about pursuing this Data dream goal.
Right. You mentioned the very first time Data showed up was actually in a non-lucid dream. Is that right?
Yeah, that was interesting. I was just in a standard, non-lucid adventure scenario with some friends on some kind of mission, and Data just kind of, materialized alongside us. Even in that uncontrolled state, conversationally, we somehow ended up talking about Q in the Deja Q episode.
Which famously features both characters.
Exactly. So even without lucidity, my mind was already connecting these threads,
Which is itself pretty fascinating, how the mind processes information and relationships, even when you're not consciously aware. But the core of the project, the active pursuit, that began when you shifted focus to attempting this in lucid dreams.
Right.
You recalled achieving 2 relatively short lucid dreams where Data made appearances, but you felt there was basically no progress on the actual Vim goal itself.
Yeah, mostly due to the brevity,
Yeah.
You were just too short.
True. Those were fleeting moments. But even those early short attempts yielded some crucial insights, especially that very first lucid dream experience where you tried to interact with him specifically for this purpose.
Right. I remember initially struggling to even summon Data into the dream scene.
Which is a very common hurdle in lucid dreaming, isn't it? You become aware, you want something or someone to appear, but the dream mind doesn't always just comply instantly.
No, it's not like a video game where you just spawn an NPC.
Yeah,
surely. I was trying to will him there,
Yeah.
Expecting him just to pop up, and it wasn't working. But then I started paying attention to the dream environment I was in. It was a place I call Studio B, and I was in this hallway that had this distinct yellowish-orange paint. And it was lit with UV lights.
And you made a connection, right, between those visual details and Data himself?
Yes. The yellowish-orange reminded me of his Starfleet uniform color, And the UV light's color, it kind of reminded me of his skin tone under certain lighting.
So you consciously decided to use those similarities. You focused on the colors, actively thinking about how they related to data.
Essentially using them as visual cues to trigger my internal data schemas. All the memories, images, information my mind holds about him.
And that's where you had that powerful aha moment about schema triggering, wasn't it? By actively engaging those specific memories and associations related to data, you made it easier for your mind, which is trying to generate this dream world, to access the blueprint for him, so to speak.
It was amazing. After focusing on those colors and thinking of him, data seemed to just pop right out of the light in the wall with magic colors. It was sudden, vibrant, directly linked to engaging those specific memories. That felt like unlocking a key.
Yeah, that phenomenon using existing dream elements or consciously bringing related memories to the front to manifest people or objects, it's a critical technique. Your experience perfectly illustrates how effective it can be in counteracting that memory repression that sometimes happens in dreams.
Right, he exists, but activating the detail file on him helps the dream builder render him.
Precisely. Once he was there in that first lucid interaction, you actually had a brief conversation.
We did. It even touched upon the nature of dreaming itself, comparing the experience to the Phantasms episode of Star Trek, where Data explores his own dreams. It felt very meta, bridging the dream world with my knowledge of his own experiences with dreaming.
Fascinating how your mind integrated that specific character context right into the dream conversation. After that, the scene shifted rather abruptly, you said.
Yes, we somehow transitioned to a darker apartment setting. It had a computer in it, which seemed perfect for the goal, but that's where the infamous light switch incident happened.
Ah, yes, the classic, almost cliché, lucid dreaming phenomenon, the uncooperative light switch.
Totally.
You noted that light switches notoriously don't work predictably in dreams, though you also mentioned they usually do work for you.
Usually, yeah. But this time, in the dark apartment, it just didn't.
Dead switch.
I reached for it, nothing.
Yeah.
It felt dead. And I had this intuition, this feeling kind of bubbling up from the dream state that it wouldn't work. But then I had an idea. I was lucid. Data was there. Why not have him try? Maybe an android could make it work,
So you asked Data to flip the switch, and this seemingly simple request led to a really profound moment of insight, didn't it? Into how your dream mind was modeling the character, operating on a whole other level, you said.
Exactly. In my waking imagination, if I pictured Data flipping a light switch, I'd just assume he'd see it, understand my intent instantly, flip it. Automatic. But in the dream, when I asked him to do it, he paused and asked for confirmation.
He asked which switch.
Yeah. Do I flip this switch right here? He asked, gesturing slightly.
And you felt a brief moment of annoyance, like, come on, Data, it's the only switch. Don't waste dream time.
Yes, that flicker of frustration was real. But it immediately dissolved into amazement. That brief question, that need for clarity from the dream data, it revealed something crucial about the dream mind's generative process.
Right.
It wasn't just modeling a character that would implicitly understand my unvoiced intent.
Right. It was modeling a distinct entity based on your understanding of Data's logical nature, who would realistically ask for clarification on an ambiguous prompt, even in a dream.
It was like my internal AI generator operating with its own logic, not just fulfilling my subconscious command without thought. It felt less like controlling a character and more like interacting with something separate, even if ultimately it's part of my own mind.
That's a fantastic observation. It suggests the dream mind isn't just playing back pre-recorded character scripts. It's actively generating behavior based on the schemas it's accessing. And sometimes that generation includes moments of unexpected realism or logical processes you didn't consciously anticipate.
Totally. And just to put a cap on it, even when Data flipped the switch after I confirmed, it still didn't work.
Huh. So the underlying dream phenomenon persisted regardless of who tried it.
Yep. Reinforcing that while lucid control exists, the dream world still has its own inherent rules and tendencies.
And you also mused on that interesting pattern you've noticed. Consciously expecting light switches not to work often seems to make them work, and vice versa.
It's that weird dance between conscious expectation and the dream's often contrary reality. I wondered if my underlying expectation of failure when I first tried it, even when Data took over, might have subtly influenced the outcome. Who knows?
After that illuminating light switch moment, you mentioned your memory of the rest of the conversation in that first dream was pretty limited, only about 30 seconds followed by static.
Yeah, very fuzzy after that.
And this led to a critical early learning for the project. The absolute necessity of setting a conscious intention within the lucid dream itself to remember details upon waking.
Oh, absolutely. You realized that simply being lucid wasn't enough. You had to explicitly tell your mind while you were dreaming, remember this. Focus on retaining these specific details.
That was a game changer, you said.
Huge. That first dream, even though the lucidity was short and the goal wasn't achieved, it provided foundational lessons. How to summon data by triggering schemas, the surprising fidelity and unexpected logic of the dream mind's character modeling, and the crucial need for explicit memory intention.
Okay, moving to the second brief lucid dream you recounted. This one took place in a setting you called Studio A. You mentioned initially failing to summon data again, but he eventually appeared after some effort.
Like that really strange one where you seem to be getting direct answers from the dream itself.
Ugh, yes, the hand flashing thing. It's so weird, but it's happened multiple times. I'd ask the dream a question like, is this gonna work? Or is that door safe? May, look down at my hand, and it flashes a color. Green for yes, red for no, yellow for maybe.
A visual yes-no-maybe system from your subconscious. Did you ever get other colors?
Yes. Blue has flashed a couple of times, still haven't figured out what blue means. Maybe insufficient data, or ask again later.
Haha. Could be. This attempt delivered another dose of the dream mind's capacity for the utterly bizarre. When Data appeared, he was 8 feet tall.
8 feet tall.
Just towering over everything. He couldn't even fit through the doorway of the room.
Which is, again, not something you consciously wish for or expected. It's another prime example of the generative nature of the dream mind, pulling from your data schemas, but rendering the output with unexpected, even nonsensical variations.
Exactly. It's like an image generation AI asked to create data and just adds an arbitrary parameter like make him giant. Where did that come from?
But being lucid, you knew you could exert control.
Right. I consciously used dream control to shrink him back down to his normal approximate 5'11" size.
Which worked. However, similar to the first attempt, the lucidity was brief. You had a short conversation, but you admitted the main goal of teaching him VIM was forgotten in the moment, calling it wasted time relative to the objective.
Yeah, it was frustrating in the moment, feeling like precious lucid time wasn't being used for the main purpose. But as I reflected later, even those seemingly wasted moments often yield important observations, just like the light switch example. The process of attempting the goal is teaching me more than just the potential outcome, you know?
True. The journey, not just the destination. And after Data disappeared from that second dream, you decided to summon him again to try and continue the goal.
I did. This time, I, again, intentionally focused on triggering schemas by thinking vividly about his appearance and characteristics.
And you experimented with a different summoning approach, phrasing it as a voice command, almost like activating a simulation. You said, "Dream load my data program."
Yes.
You noted that dream has been a personal trigger phrase for dream control for almost a decade, predating your Star Trek stuff, but framing it like a holodeck program felt particularly appropriate.
It did. And it worked better this time, which I again linked back to consciously engaging those memories and schemas. It really seems that actively recalling details about data helps counteract the general memory repression or fogginess that can hinder manifestation in dreams.
And you used that experience to reinforce the comparison you've made that dreams, in their generated interactive nature, can feel very much like a holodeck that actually exists in the real world.
They really do. A convincing simulated reality you can step into and interact with, albeit one with unpredictable programming quirks. You also briefly mentioned other instances where data has appeared in non-lucid dreams, but in those cases, nothing specific to the learning goal occurred. He was just sort of a passive presence in the background.
So these initial experiences, though sometimes frustratingly brief or sidetracked, they were absolutely crucial. They taught you fundamental lessons about summoning, the bizarre ways the dream mind models things, the challenges of dream memory, and the importance of intention and actively triggering your stored knowledge.
Definitely. They laid the groundwork for understanding the unique environment of this specific dream project before the more complex attempts could even begin.
And speaking of the mind's unexpected modeling, one of the sources describes a fascinating dream experience where the tables were turned. Instead of interacting with data, you became him.
Oh yes, that was a really weird but insightful non-lucid dream. I remember finding or somehow acquiring the makeup that Brent Spiner used to wear for Data in Lore.
And you recounted applying it, looking in the mirror and seeing a truly striking resemblance to Data. You even felt like you looked more like Brent Spiner than your own reflection.
Yeah, feeling a strong sense of pride in achieving that specific look right down to the sideburns. It was bizarrely convincing within the dream logic, and I was going around in the dream claiming to other dream characters that I was Data.
What's particularly revealing about that dream is the reaction, or lack thereof, from the other dream characters. You expected some kind of awe or surprise, but they largely just shrugged it off.
Totally anticlimactic. I was Data, look at me, and they just didn't care. But even more surprising was encountering Brent Spiner himself in the dream.
And he was apparently annoyed and not very impressed by your transformation and claims.
Yes. Which is such an interesting layer the dream mind added. It felt like maybe a psychological projection of how the real Brent Spiner might react, or perhaps an internal critique of my own attempt to step into that persona. The mind wasn't just creating the visual, it was generating a complex scenario with unexpected social dynamics and psychological responses.
And you noted this dream happened on the same night as other lucid Data appearances, but this specific transformation dream was non-lucid.
Right. It really highlights the different kinds of content and experiences that can arise depending on your state of consciousness, even within the same sleep period. Non-lucid dreams often operate with their own internal logic and narratives, free from conscious direction.
It feels like your subconscious was processing the idea of being Data, distinct from the conscious goal of interacting with him while lucid.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving beyond character interactions and transformations, you also began actively experimenting with controlling the dream environment itself, specifically focusing on scene changes, again, drawing on those holodeck concepts.
Right. I had a lucid dream where I had the intention of working on the Data goal, but the scene I found myself in was completely unsuitable, a car dealership.
Not exactly the place for teaching VIM.
Not ideal. So I consciously decided to manipulate the environment using the concept of ending or loading a holodeck program. I used my long-standing trigger phrase combined with a command. Dream end program.
And the first time you tried it?
Nothing happened. The car dealership just stayed there. It felt like the command wasn't registering. Then I actively visualized the Star Trek holodeck, specifically the grid lines that appear when a program ends or starts. I engaged that specific memory.
And trying the command again, after engaging that specific schema.
The scene did change. It seamlessly faded from the car dealership to that distinct grid-lined holodeck world I visualized. I again linked this success to consciously engaging memory and relevant schemas after the initial attempt failed, likely because the memory wasn't fully accessible or primed the first time.
That sounds incredibly cool, like a perfect special effect. Seeing that seamless transition must have felt like true environmental control.
It really did. After successfully reaching the holodeck grid, I then commanded the dream to load another scene. Dream, go to bedroom, hoping for a setting with computer.
And you did land in a bedroom, but it wasn't your specific bedroom with the computer setup you had in mind.
No, it was just a bedroom in the house. I think my mind likely accessed a more general bedroom schema, the typical concept of a bedroom rather than the highly specific details of my own.
Which makes sense. The dream mind is drawing on patterns and concepts, not necessarily perfect photographic recall, but still a significant success in changing scenes drastically and seamlessly.
Yeah, it got me thinking about other methods beyond just finding portals, like the Doctor Strange-style portals, or even weird things like vacuum tubes I've considered using for transport. But the seamlessness of the holodeck transition was particularly exciting.
And you noted that upon successfully arriving in that dream house bedroom, the Data goal, which had prompted the scene change, was actually forgotten.
Yep. Forgotten in favor of another long-planned dream goal that conveniently fit the bedroom setting, which I was able to accomplish.
Which really underscores the persistent challenge of maintaining focused intention in lucid dreams, even when you achieve control over the environment or summoning.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to get sidetracked by whatever pops into the dream or whatever feels immediately achievable in the current environment. But having that successful scene change technique, that's a crucial tool for future Data attempts, making sure I can get us to a suitable setting with a computer.
Which brings us to one of the most recent and richly detailed attempts you recounted, specifically focused on the core goal of trying to teach Data VIM. This experience, detailed in one of the sources, is just packed with bizarre events and insights.
Oh, this dream was wild from the start. It began with lucidity triggering in my front yard after some genuinely strange garage door weirdness happened in the non-lucid lead-up. That strangeness gave me the hunch, that flicker of awareness that I was dreaming.
And once lucid, you immediately began experimenting with a new form of dream control.
Yes.
You were thinking about cue-like finger snapping.
Yes. trying to control reality with a snap. I tried closing the garage door with a snap and it worked, but not instantly like Q. There was a slight delay. I tried changing a license plate, and I snapped to make a tree fall down in the yard.
Making a tree fall sounds incredibly powerful.
It was. And then I snapped again, and it went right back up, like rewinding time. It felt like I had this immense power, but it also felt like there was this weird friction sometimes when snapping. Some things worked instantly, others took a snap or two or felt resistant. I wondered if that friction related to how difficult the mind found it to generate that specific effect.
Interesting. You then experience sleep fragmentation, waking briefly, and then re-entering the dream state. You described intense physical sensations upon re-entry and seeing your kitchen cuckoo clock appear in your vision before the full dream scene solidified around you.
That transition back into the dream was jarring and disorienting. But seeing the clock in my vision, even before the room was fully formed, I had a hunch. I thought, okay, I could already be in a dream again, and decided to just act like I was lucid, even if I wasn't fully certain yet.
And the scene did form around the clock. You noticed the clock wasn't ticking. And again, you used your new Q-snap control. You snapped your fingers.
And the pendulum started swinging, the clock began ticking, success again. This felt like confirming lucidity and control. I then walked into the bedroom in the dream house, thinking about the computer. And that's where the dream mind's bizarre modeling really kicked into high gear.
Okay, describe what you saw in the bedroom.
The cuckoo clock in the bedroom, which in waking life has 2 weights, had 4 weights.
Oh.
3 were standard size, but the 4th was described as being the size of a small suitcase. And then I noticed there was a duplicate clock hanging on the window, just suspended there with nothing holding it up.
Wow. That is classic dream logic or illogic. Hyper-specific, vivid details like the suitcase-sized weight paired with completely nonsensical elements like a duplicate floating clock. It's the generative process again, pulling clock weights and clocks from your schemas, but combining them in a way that defies waking physics and common sense.
It was so weirdly convincing within the dream. I used my Q-snap control on the bedroom clock too, making it tick. I even attempted to teleport the massive suitcase weight from the wall to the bed with a snap, which felt dicey, like it wasn't fully working, but seemed to partially succeed.
Okay, so at this point, amidst the bizarre clocks and key snapping, you consciously realized you were getting sidetracked from the actual goal, right?
Yeah.
Teaching Data VIM.
Right. I paused and thought, okay, what was I supposed to be doing? And I made a conscious decision to try and maintain logic and focus by talking out loud. I set the intention to narrate my thoughts and actions throughout the rest of the dream to keep my mind coherent.
This is that crucial technique you've identified for maintaining lucidity and focus, engaging your System 2 thinking.
Exactly. Think of System 1 as the brain's default mode, fast, intuitive autopilot. Great for navigating waking life automatically, but in a dream, that autopilot leads to illogical jumps, getting distracted, forgetting goals. System 2 is the manual override, slow, effortful, logical processing. By narrating out loud, describing what I'm doing and thinking, I'm forcing my brain into that System 2 mode. It's like constantly running a self-diagnostic and reminding myself of the mission parameters.
So once you felt a bit more centered by narrating,
I summoned Data in the bedroom, which was the ideal location with the computer. I used a voice command, slightly different wording this time, Data, appear, but it still worked. He materialized.
and Data's appearance was, again, unusual.
Yeah. He was in a purple outfit, not his standard uniform, and his face initially looked mostly like Data, but also had a resemblance to Robin Williams.
Robin Williams.
Which, thinking about it later, makes a strange kind of sense, given Brent Spiner's versatility and resemblance to Robin Williams in certain roles or appearances. The dream mind was perhaps pulling from a broader set of associations with Brent Spiner's appearance. Data's face did solidify more into the expected look over time in the dream.
You also noted persistent lighting issues again. The scene was initially dark.
And I realized I felt like I was wearing a welding helmet, which made it brighter when I took it off, but still dark. Then, after Data appeared, I noticed I was wearing sunglasses, and taking those off finally brought the scene to full brightness.
Just another layer of the weird, nonsensical details the dream weaves in. Why a welding helmet? Why sunglasses after summoning Data? It's these layers of unexpected modeling that make dream analysis so fascinating.
Totally.
Once the scene and character felt stable, you had your initial interaction, asked him how he was.
Yeah, standard good response. Then decided to head towards the computer. But before starting the VIM lesson, I wanted to show him the Q-snap thing. I noticed the bedroom cuckoo clock had stopped ticking again, so I snapped my fingers to make it start. And I told him, see, I'm kind of like Q now.
And his reaction to this was particularly insightful. He initially seemed doubtful. responding with a simple, noncommittal, well.
And I immediately added, well, I'm not 100% perfect. I admitted the limitation, the friction I felt when snapping. And that's where his tone changed. I felt this shift in the dream interaction, sensing a good-for-you vibe from Data. It wasn't necessarily in his words, but in the subtle way, the dream mind modeled his response.
You interpreted that as the dream mind modeling Data, appreciating that human trait of admitting imperfection, showing humility.
Exactly. It felt like the dream mind was drawing on my understanding of his character arc, his journey to understand human foibles and virtues. After that interaction, I stated my intention. Okay, let's get started on the goal. We might not have much time.
And this is where the dream took a truly unexpected, spontaneous turn.
It was bizarre. Without me teaching him, without any instruction, Data just immediately started typing on the computer out of nowhere.
Just started typing.
Yeah. And he was making several typos, but also hitting some correct letters. He just spontaneously engaged with the computer, skipping the entire learning process I intended.
And the program he was apparently typing in, the Windows 10 camera app.
The camera app. I use it in real life for display capture, which might explain why it appeared, but it doesn't explain why he was typing in it. It was nonsensical.
And you tried to analyze what he was doing.
Yeah, the interface looked like NeoVim, an advanced variant of Vim that I don't even use yet in waking life. It even had syntax highlighting, the color coding. He was typing random gibberish near the bottom right of the screen, but some characters were correct. I speculated he might have used the mouse to position the cursor, not actual Vim shortcuts. It was like the dream mind decided, okay, he wants Data to use a computer, and just spontaneously generated the scene of him using one, pulling random elements, camera app, NeoVim interface, random text, typos from my computer knowledge, and throwing them together.
This spontaneous action happening right after you declared, let's get started, suggests the dream mind responded literally to your intention to begin interacting with the computer, but interpreted it in a completely unexpected way, bypassing the planned steps.
Exactly. It's another example of that generative AI-like behavior. Given a high-level prompt, Data use computer, it generates a scene, but the details of that scene can be pulled from unexpected places and combined illogically.
Incredibly insightful, even if it completely derailed the immediate plan.
Oh yeah. I had to bring the focus back. I told Data, okay, hold on. We need to learn first.
And to facilitate the actual learning process you intended, you used a voice command to summon a specific real-world website, nitrotype.com.
Yes. I said dreamload nitrotype.com.
And the website loaded successfully within the dream.
Which, again, is remarkable. The mind modeled a complex, functional, real-world website within the dream environment. It was there, on the screen. But unfortunately, that's where the dream faded, and I woke up shortly after.
So while you didn't get to see Data actually take the typing test or begin learning Vim in that attempt, it was perhaps the most revealing dream yet about the inner workings of your dream mind.
Absolutely. Its capacity for spontaneous actions, its detailed, but sometimes nonsensical modeling, the subtle character interactions.
It felt like a productive failure, maybe, or just a really insightful detour. The learning wasn't about Vim in that moment, but about the nature of the dream state itself.
Exactly. That sums it up well.
Building on these experiences and learnings, another recent attempt highlighted some of the fundamental challenges with logic and memory that are inherent to navigating the lucid dream state, as described in Source 8.
Ah, yes. This was a regained awareness dream. I initially found myself in a house with secret tunnels. I gained lucidity by noticing an illogical detail. One of the tunnels supposedly connected this house to a completely different house located 3 hours away in waking life.
And recognizing that impossible connection, that logic only works in dream world, that served as your reality check, triggering awareness.
Yep. And again, immediately began the narration technique. Okay, I'm dreaming, narrating now. And this time, I consciously decided to spend a moment grounding myself before jumping straight into the Data goal.
You reflected on the importance of this grounding, especially when operating outside the ideal conditions for lucid dreaming, like the beginner's luck phase or during specific types of morning naps. You discussed the difficulty of maintaining focused intention past that initial honeymoon phase.
Right. When your average brain chemistry might not be as conducive to sustain lucidity and logical thought. It's about fighting that System 1 autopilot. In an average state, you need to actively center yourself, wake up your mind, and anchor your logic.
You referenced techniques like Daniel Love's
Noetic
observational window, constantly observing the dream environment and your thoughts with a critical, logical eye, using that System 2 processing.
Exactly. Narration is key to this because it's a constant, active task that keeps that logical part of your brain engaged.
Unfortunately, in this specific dream, after grounding yourself, the scene spontaneously changed to an outdoor setting.
Yep, again, not suitable for the computer-based data goal. But I summoned data anyway, via voice command. He faded on like a hologram. And perhaps too eagerly, I immediately asked him about what he was doing, typing in the camera app in the previous dream.
He gave you an explanation, describing it as an email thing he was doing as a trick to help fit in with human society. You described his explanation as bizarre in content, but his delivery was incredibly convincing.
Oh, it was uncanny. Exactly how the real character would talk, I thought. The dream mind modeled his voice, his cadence, his slightly formal language perfectly. He gave this whole detailed explanation for nearly a minute.
And here was the crucial mistake, the one that vividly illustrated how dream logic can be dicey in the most strange and unpredictable ways. While Data was delivering this insightful, character-accurate explanation, you spent most of that minute focusing on something else.
Ah, yes. I was trying to write down everything he was saying in the dream. I found a notebook or something and was frantically scribbling down his explanation word for word.
And then, compounding the error, you spent the remainder of your lucidity in that dream trying to back up those dream notes to Google Drive within the dream environment.
It was such a frustrating facepalm moment when I woke up. The stark realization that writing things down in a dream, interacting with dream technology like a Google Drive interface, it just doesn't persist into waking life. All that precious lucid time and mental effort were wasted on a process with no real-world outcome.
This provided a frustrating lesson about prioritizing where you focus your mental energy in a lucid dream, instead of relying on unreliable dream tools.
The focus needed to be on mentally committing those details to memory while listening to data.
Absolutely. It reinforced the importance of that active system 2 processing, not just narrating actions, but narrating key details I want to remember and consciously attempting to file them away in my waking memory, not my fleeting dream memory.
It also highlighted the need to ensure the scene is conducive to the goal before starting, or having a reliable method to change the scene if needed.
Definitely.
You also briefly mentioned another similar experience the very next day involving regained awareness and sleep fragmentation, but in that instance, the data goal was forgotten entirely.
Yeah, illustrating how precarious maintaining intent can be.
And you referenced another difficult lucid dream where vision was severely limited for a long time, but you persevered with goals using tactile and auditory senses, showing that even significant sensory limitations don't have to completely prevent progress if intent is strong. Those experiences, particularly the writing-saving mistake, are tough lessons learned, but they offer incredibly clear insights into the quirky, unpredictable nature of dream logic and memory. They highlight the specific cognitive challenges of the lucid state. And based on the updates you've shared since that last chat, which was, wow, about 11 months ago now,
Has it been that long? Okay.
it seems like straightforward progress on the actual VIM lesson hasn't been the main headline.
No, not exactly. It's more been about the attempts. And honestly, the unexpected ways those attempts have gone off the rails, those detours have been surprisingly revealing.
Right. So you haven't, like, sat down for the full hour-long VIM tutorial in the dream yet.
Haha. No, not quite. But the process of trying, you know?
So let's get into this latest big attempt you described. The one that really seemed to highlight that unpredictable dream generation. You said it didn't even start lucid?
No, it didn't. It just began as a regular non-lucid dream. I was in a store initially, kind of a generic department store vibe.
Wow.
And then as dreams do, the scene sort of shifted. It transitioned into this office space, but it felt like it was still somehow inside the store, like an office tucked away in the back of a Target or something.
Weird. And that office setting, that's where the data goal suddenly snapped into focus for you? How did that happen?
Pure dream serendipity, really. I overheard someone, just some background dream character, say something like, they didn't know how to use Vim?
Wow, the dream just handed it to you.
Right. Hearing Vim was like a trigger. It immediately connected to my stored intention, that long-term goal. It just clicked. Like the dream itself, my subconscious was saying, okay, here's your chance.
So the context itself activated the goal.
Yeah.
You mentioned you didn't even do any reality checks right then, but you felt this strong sense it was time, and you started acting with dream awareness, even if not full-on stable lucidity.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't that sudden jolt of, oh my God, I'm dreaming, that sometimes happens with a reality check. It was quieter, more like, okay, this is the scenario, this is the moment, let's try it. A kind of goal-specific awareness kicked in. I knew I was in a place where the rules were different, where I could, try to make things happen, even if, as it turned out, making things happen was unpredictable.
Okay, so you're in the office, goal activated.
Yeah.
First step,
Yeah.
get Data into the scene. How did you go about trying to summon him?
Well, my usual method, especially if there's a clear entry point like a door, is expectation. I focused on this closed door in the office space, and I just deliberately expected Data to walk through it.
Like mentally projecting that intention.
Yeah, telling myself this is a dream, anyone could come through that door, really reinforcing the idea that the environment is malleable and setting that specific intention for my subconscious to hopefully generate data.
And something did happen pretty quickly, you said. Just not quite what you intended initially.
No. Someone else walked through. Just a random dream character. Now, maybe in the past I would have been annoyed, like, wrong, try again, or tried to dismiss them somehow.
Right.
But this time, I consciously decided to just let it be. Okay, that's the dream's first output based on my general someone walk through command. Fine. I just let the character walk through the scene and leave. Didn't interact, just observed.
So you sort of accepted the dream's initial offering rather than fighting it. And then once they were gone, door closed again, you tried a second time.
Yeah. This time, I really focused the intention. I consciously brought Data to mind, his image, his mannerisms, activating those mental schemas I have of him, all the detailed knowledge and associations my brain holds about Data.
Okay.
And I repeated the door expectation, really zeroing in on Data this time.
And someone came through, but it wasn't quite Data visually at first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The person who appeared, I had this strong intuitive feeling like this is him, but looking at him visually, not a perfect match right away. There was something slightly off. But then this is where it got really cool. As I kept looking at him, focusing my attention, his appearance started to change. Gradually. It was like watching a blurry photo come into focus. His face, the uniform details, the skin tone, it all refined over maybe 5-10 seconds, smoothly shifting until, yep, that was definitely Data, unmistakably him.
Wow. That's a fascinating glimpse into the process, isn't it? It suggests the mind doesn't always just instantly pop out a perfect high-res model on demand.
Right.
It might generate a kind of placeholder based on the core request data, and then use your conscious focus, your reinforcement of those schemas, to sort of refine the details, to consolidate the image against its internal blueprint.
It totally felt like watching a complex character model sort of boot up or load into the scene, driven by my focused attention, not instant, but this dynamic refinement. So, okay, Data's there, he's solid, we're sitting at a table, and conveniently, there's a computer, a laptop, keyboard visible, perfect setup, right?
Seems ideal.
Time for step one, show him the keyboard layout, the physical interface for Vim.
And cue the first classic dream glitch.
Oh, yeah. Immediately. I looked down at the keyboard expecting, standard QWERTY. But I noticed something's fundamentally off. The A key. It's sitting right in the middle of the top row, like where T or Y should be. Nowhere near its home on the left of the middle row. Just wrong.
A basic rendering error on a super familiar object.
Yeah.
And your reaction to spotting this error was unique.
It was one of those moments where you just kind of pause in the dream like, wait, what? I saw the misplaced A, and almost without thinking, I tilted my head, looking at it sideways, questioning it. And as I tilted my head, the key itself morphed across the keyboard.
Morphed, like slid over.
No, not slid. It was weirder. It changed position in this sort of hell shade pattern, like a visual artifact or an optical illusion shifting. It moved from the wrong spot to the correct spot, but the transition itself was visually bizarre, tied directly to my head tilt.
That is a perfect example of that weird dream logic, or maybe the lack of it. You spot an error, and instead of the dream just fixing it instantly or ignoring you, the environment reacts to your observation in this physically impossible way.
Exactly.
It's like the mind is trying to reconcile your knowledge, A is wrong, with its own rendered reality. A is here, and that reconciliation process becomes this visible distortion linked to your physical gesture.
Yeah.
Really shows the dream isn't static. It's this active, responsive simulation, just with really, really strange physics.
It felt like my focus, my questioning gaze, literally warped the object into place, but yeah, in the weirdest way possible. So, okay, the A key is now correct, but the overall keyboard was still kind of fuzzy, not super clear visually. So I decided to try a voice command. That often works as a shortcut in lucid dreams, right? Just say what you want. My command was simple. Increase keyboard clarity.
Logical enough, make the keyboard clear, but that's not what happened.
Nope. Instead of the keyboard getting sharper, the computer screen lit up, and it showed me completely irrelevant search engine results.
My command was specific. Keyboard clarity. But the dream mind, or the simulation, seemed to interpret it through the nearest interactive thing, the computer, and defaulted to its generic computer interaction script, which apparently means do a web search.
That's another fascinating insight, isn't it? How it processes commands. It seems like it grabs keywords computer, maybe clarity, and maps them to functions from its general model of how things work, like computers do searches, rather than understanding the very specific nuance you intended. Apply a visual sharpening effect to the physical keyboard object.
Yeah, it's like it needs the exact schema for that specific action to be strongly activated. Otherwise, it falls back on broader related associations. It took the path of least resistance using its default computer stuff model.
Okay, so you see these random search results. What next?
Well, seeing search results made me think, okay, search is too broad anyway if I eventually want an image of the layout. AI would be better for that, right? AI understands more nuanced requests.
Makes sense. And thinking about AI led to the next unexpected turn. Instantly. The moment I had that thought, the computer screen just switched, search results gone, now it's showing an AI prompt interface, like ChatGPT or something similar.
Just like that.
Just like that. And even weirder was the text input. As I started speaking my commands into this AI interface, the text was appearing in the box faster than I was speaking. Almost like it was transcribing my thoughts or intentions directly, not just my voice.
That speed thing, again, shows how it bypasses external limits, just rendering internal thought. But this dream AI interface had its own peculiar limitation.
Yeah, despite the amazing speed, the text box had this ridiculously short character limit. And because I was talking pretty fast, trying to explain what I wanted, I hit the limit almost immediately.
And there was that detail about the text box itself. You mentioned it had a character limit at first.
Yes. But then, as you kept talking faster,
It just expanded. The rectangle just grew bigger on the screen.
automatically stretched out to fit all the words you were throwing at it, on the fly.
Wow. So the interface itself was dynamic. It understood, somehow, that more input was coming and just adapted.
Yeah, it shows how fluid that dream interface was. Totally responsive. Instead of doing anything related to keyboards or images or even giving an error, somehow triggered the generation of an entire scene.
What?
On the screen first, it generated text describing a lake and woods, rocks leading down to the water. Pretty detailed description.
Okay, so text output.
But then, and this is the really wild part, the dream scene itself changed. 1 second, Data and I are in the office looking at this screen. The next, we are standing on rocks, walking towards the very lake and woods described on the screen. The AI's text output literally became the physical environment around us.
Hold on. Let's really get into this.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a scene change. It was a scene change explicitly generated by the text output of a dream simulated AI. What's your take on that? How does that even work?
I know, it's mind-bending. It felt like the dream mind latched on to the concept of AI generation and the idea of generating content and just took it literally. It generated a world, the specifics lake, woods, probably just random associations. But the mechanism felt tied to that AI context. It's like the dream saying, you want AI generation? Fine, here's a generated reality.
Right.
It's incredibly literal, but also symbolic. It really hammered home that idea of the dream as this powerful biological AI or computer processing complex inputs, even simulated ones, and generating these complex outputs, just following its own bizarre associative logic.
Like a dream simulation interface generating the dream simulation itself.
Yeah.
So while you're wandering around this accidental AI-generated landscape, you actually talk to Data.
Yeah, I was kind of stunned by how real it looked. You know, even for a dream, the detail was impressive. So I turned to Data and started telling him about modern AI, like Sora, that can generate realistic video from text. I said something like, see, this isn't too far off from what our tech can almost do now.
And how did he react?
Totally in character. He just sort of tilted his head, processed it, and acknowledged understanding, absorbing this new info about 21st century tech, just like Data would.
Okay. And then, just as suddenly as this AI world appeared, it vanished.
Pretty much. We were walking towards the lake. I mentioned Sora, he nodded, and then I just turned around, looking back towards where the office used to be. And as I turned, poof, seamless transition right back to the office space.
Seamless this time, unlike the keyboard morphing.
Totally different. The keyboard thing was glitchy, weird, tied to my direct focus and action. This was smooth, like a film cut, or just instantly being back. No weird visual artifacts, just back in the office.
That contrast is really interesting. The keyboard correction felt like a local, glitchy render update. This scene change was global, smooth, triggered just by your turning or shifting focus. It really suggests the dream mind has different tools, different mechanisms for altering its simulation, right? Some are smooth reality edits, others are these bizarre interactive glitches.
Yeah, definitely felt like different processes were at play. So, okay, we're back in the office, and I'm thinking, right, totally sidetracked by the AI world detour. Got to get back to Vim. Focus. I decided the next logical step was a visual aid. Find an image of a QWERTY keyboard. I figured, voice command, again, it's a dream luxury, might as well use it. I even mentioned that to Data, like, see? Voice commands for image search, very convenient in here.
Okay, so you do the voice search for a QWERTY layout.
And I start looking through the image results on the dream computer screen. At first, it's mostly what you'd expect, abstract diagrams of keyboards. Functional, but kind of boring. But then, mixed in with these diagrams, completely out of the blue, there's this photo. A specific photo. It's Data, standing with Worf and Alexander from a scene in TNG.
What? Why would that come up in a keyboard search?
No idea. Totally random, totally irrelevant, but very specific.
And then came arguably the weirdest part of the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. The peak weirdness. I saw that photo on the screen, instantly recognized it, and my attention just snapped to it. I looked up from the screen towards Data, probably about to say something like, hey, look at this weird picture. And there he was, Data, standing in the room, not with Alexander, but with some other random dream person. But the background, the setting around him, it perfectly matched the photo on the screen. The dream scene had physically reenacted the photo.
Wait. So the simulation didn't just show you the image on its simulated screen?
No.
It took the content of that random, unexpected image and projected it, rendered it, into the physical space of the dream. A little live-action tableau based on a search result.
Exactly. It wasn't just Data. It was Data in the context of that photo, maybe slightly modified with a different character. But the environment, the setup, it was a physical manifestation of the image I'd just seen on the screen.
That is extraordinary. What does that even suggest about how the dream mind treats information it displays within the dream?
It's like the screen wasn't just a display. It was another input source for generating the reality around the screen. It saw the image, recognized the elements data, background, and instead of just leaving it as pixels, it decided to render that scene into the actual dream space.
Yeah.
Like it was processing the image data as instructions for reality generation.
Different from the AI world, which came from text output. This came from image output being turned into reality.
Yeah. It feels like the mind is constantly trying to integrate whatever it perceives, even if the perception is coming from a simulated computer screen within the dream itself. It's treating that internal screen data as real enough input to physically manifest. And just the sheer shock, the bizarreness of seeing that specific random photo suddenly happening right there.
That's what did it. It broke your focus.
Completely. That level of unexpected meta weirdness was too much. The simulation just felt too unstable, too strange. The jarring disconnect of seeing that image become real was so potent, it just yanked me right out. Woke up instantly.
Wow. Okay. So looking back at this whole attempt, the mission was teach Data VIM. The result was almost zero Vim teaching.
Pretty much, yeah.
But this journey through like a catalog of dream simulation quirks, incorrect object rendering, reality morphing tied to head tilts, search engines going rogue, and AI accidentally generating a walkable world from text, seamless scene changes, random image results popping up, and finally a literal photo reenactment that crashed the whole system.
Minimal progress on the task, maximum data on the process, and honestly, that's become the fascinating part. The value isn't in whether I got to Vim Command I for insert mode, it's in observing these bizarre ways the mind simulates things. The goal just becomes the catalyst, the thing that kicks off these weird, revealing events.
And that really sums up this shift in perspective you mentioned, right? What might have felt like frustrating distractions or failures before are now seen as the main event, almost.
Absolutely. The original goal is still the target, but it's also now just the starting point for this wider exploration. The real deep dive has become charting this unexpected territory the dream throws up. It's about asking, okay, this AI world detour is weird, but is it useful weird? Does it tell me something interesting about how my mind generates stuff? If yes, then it's not a failure. It's a successful observation.
It turns the bugs into features, in a way. Features of the mind's operating system.
Exactly. And this whole experience feeds into these bigger lessons about trying to operate logically within that dream space. Definitely. And beyond that big attempt, there have been other shorter data-related dreams over the last year that add more pieces to the puzzle.
Then there was that incomplete summoning, the flat people incident you mentioned.
Right, trying the holodeck-style summon in a really busy, chaotic dream scene just seemed to overload the system, resulting in those weird 2D stuck figures. Felt like an aborted rendering process.
And you had that non-lucid dream in the costume room where you interacted with Data not about Vim, but about his strength.
Yeah, I suggested it'd be funny if he just effortlessly carried someone.
Yeah.
And his reaction was pure data. No easy agreement, just that slight confusion, processing the humor, and seeming more concerned about the person's dignity. It felt incredibly authentic, like the subconscious perfectly modeling his core personality, even without my conscious direction. Maybe even better than if I'd consciously tried to imagine his reaction.
That's a great point. The deep character model runs accurately on autopilot, while consciously directing specific actions seems more prone to glitches.
Seems that way. Then there were other times data just appeared basement, fancy apartment, warehouse, but I barely remember the interactions.
Which reinforces that point about presence, right?
Yeah.
If you weren't fully engaged or consciously processing, the memory just didn't encode well.
Exactly. And that ties into that super meta dream where I was watching a recording of a previous dream, the fancy apartment one.
Oh, right, the dream playback.
Yeah. And in this dream recording, the interaction with data looked way more productive and interesting than I actually remembered the original dream being. It was like a simulated memory review, but the simulation was deceptive, making the past seem better than it was. And of course, none of that recorded data stuck either. It's all just layers of simulation.
Mind-boggling. It can simulate reviewing a memory, but inaccurately, and the review itself doesn't yield real info. It's like simulated metacognition.
Totally. Then there was the funny one where a friend randomly told me, you were data, and the friend turned out to be an android too.
Uh-huh. What did you make of that?
Well, it was unexpected, but it felt like a weird echo of that much earlier dream where I actually tried to look like Data with makeup to see how dream characters reacted and got zero response. So maybe this was the subconscious finally giving me that validation years later, but also maybe hinting like, don't try so hard, just embody it. Who knows?
Subconscious callbacks. And, briefly, that other detail, someone wanted to deactivate Data with his switch.
Yeah, just a random aggressive detail the dream threw in. Maybe pulling from general Android knowledge, maybe symbolic of wanting to switch off the goal. Just another weird piece of generated content.
And in that lucid dream with the red, digital vibe, you considered asking Data about the dream's nature, but chose Daniel Love instead.
Right. The environment felt so techy, data seemed relevant. But then I thought, no, for a question about dream mechanics, the lucid dreaming expert archetype Daniel Love feels more appropriate within the dream's logic, so I decided to summon him. It was a conscious choice based on character archetypes.
Interesting reasoning within the dream, but you ended up asking about blinking instead.
Haha, yeah, another command glitch. But it reminded me of that consistent blinking reality check weirdness. How trying to blink in a dream feels like my eyelids don't close, like there are no eyelids. It's always like that. Super reliable as a reality check, but still so bizarre physically.
A consistent simulation flaw for that specific action.
Yep. Still no idea why it simulates blinking that way. And lastly, that internal debate in a dream about your potential AI podcast feature. Oh yeah. I was literally debating with myself. Should an AI-generated data be the host, or should the real AI data be the guest? Thinking about artificial generation versus artificial intelligence, I decided guest felt more authentic to his state. Just shows the mind can model these abstract, niche intellectual debates even while asleep.
Absolutely. And most recently, Data just showed up in an office, no goal attached.
Yeah, just present. Which feels like, okay, this whole project has successfully seeded him into my regular Dreamcast, even when I'm not actively trying.
Okay, so let's get into the dream itself. The scene, it's just an office. Kind of unassuming.
Yeah, pretty standard. There's a receptionist and a mother is there too.
And our listener, who shared this with us, is there with Commander Data, just observing.
Right, Data isn't really doing anything central at first. He's just present, watching, analyzing, probably.
Like our listener, yeah. Quiet observer.
So the conversation starts up between the receptionist and this mother. And she starts talking about her work, her life. And then comes the really pivotal part. She mentions she has a child with ALS.
Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. That really serious neurodegenerative condition.
Yes, exactly. And that the child needs a wheelchair. But then the The twist?
Hmm.
She says they've made a revolutionary scientific discovery together.
Wow, okay, and this is the moment, right, when it all clicks for our listener.
That's it. The pieces fall into place.
This mundane office chat suddenly becomes something else entirely. Because based on those details, the ALS, the wheelchair, the discovery,
It becomes startlingly clear who she must be.
Stephen Hawking's mother. Can you imagine realizing that in the middle of this, like, random office waiting room scenario?
The shock must have been immense, which naturally brings us to Data.
Yeah. What's his reaction? We know how much he admired Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
It's documented, right? In the show.
Absolutely. So how does Data, this android designed not to feel emotion process meeting, even in a dream, the mother of someone he holds in such high regard?
Well, his reaction was genuinely striking. He had this distinct look, a smile almost.
Really?
Yeah, like that look of profound intellectual stimulation. Remember when he first met Lore?
Ah, yes. His brother. That kind of intense focus.
Or during that birthright dream, his first real dream experience where he started grappling with creativity. It was like that.
So not emotion in our sense, but inspiration. A kind of intellectual awe.
Exactly. It was a clear look of pure, unadulterated inspiration.
That is powerful because Data's always on this quest, right? Trying to understand humanity, grappling with these abstract things like awe or inspiration.
Yeah, things that are hard for pure logic to compute.
So this dream, thanks to our listener, it gives him this unique, almost subconscious piece of data. It's not just analysis, it's deeper, a resonance.
Maybe the closest he gets to feeling genuine awe.
Could be. It really underscores how even a logical being can develop this profound admiration for incredible intellectual achievement.
And it fits, doesn't it? I mean, he actually met Hawking on the holodeck, played poker with him.
That's right. That amazing scene. A true meeting of minds. Maybe that cemented the respect for Data. And these specific, sometimes frustrating experiences with attempting the Data goal lead us to synthesize some broader observations about how the dream mind models reality, drawing on everything you've described.
It's like the mind is this incredibly powerful generator, right? Constantly building a world based on its stored information. But it's not a perfect replica of waking reality. It has its own rules, its own quirks.
You've seen examples of what we might call accurate mistakes in the modeling, like attempting to use VIM and accidentally pressing the wrong key, ampersand instead of percent, and the dream accurately modeling the result of pressing the wrong key.
Yeah. The symbol appeared, the command failed, exactly as it might in real life. Even though my conscious intention was the correct key, my subconscious motor schema might have fumbled, and the dream modeled that physical error accurately. That still blows my mind.
Wow. And then there are the instances of inaccurate, unexpected, or completely nonsensical modeling. Duplicate or misplaced keyboard keys, a jungle picture appearing where a baseball picture should be, the cuckoo clock with 4 weights, including a suitcase.
The duplicate clock hanging on the window, Data's purple outfit, the initial Robin Williams resemblance, the spontaneous appearance of sunglasses I wasn't wearing.
And of course, Data spontaneously typing on the Windows 10 camera app using a NeoVim interface with syntax highlighting.
It can model incredibly complex concepts like a Vim interface or nitrotype.com with surprising detail, drawing on my knowledge base. But then, right alongside that, it throws in these utterly illogical, random elements that make no sense.
And this directly relates back to your idea of the mind as a biological generative model.
Right.
Like large language models or image generation AI, your mind is creating a complex, detailed output, the dream world, based on patterns and information it's been trained on, your life experiences, knowledge schemas. It can generate highly realistic or complex elements, but it's generating based on probability and association, not necessarily perfect logical consistency or a complete understanding of the underlying principles. This is why AI can sometimes put bizarre details in an image or generate text that sounds plausible but is factually incorrect or nonsensical. Your dream mind seems to operate on a similar principle, high fidelity in some areas, prone to unpredictable hallucinations or errors in others.
It's a simulation running on processes that aren't bound by the strict physics and logic we rely on when awake, leading to this constant stream of both recognizable and deeply weird phenomena. Plausible reality, but with glitchy code.
So taking all these learnings, the need for schema triggering, the battle against memory repression, the power and limitations of control like cue snapping or scene changes, the crucial role of System 2 thinking and narration, the pitfalls of dream logic, like trying to write notes, what's the refined strategy for future attempts at this data dream goal?
Okay, the absolute starting point has to be engaging logic and setting the intention for narration from the moment lucidity is gained. Consciously talking out loud, describing where I am, what's happening, constantly reminding myself this is a dream. Keep that crucial system to thinking online.
And if you find yourself in a scene not suitable for the goal, like a car dealership or an outdoor setting,
Then the next step is to use the scene change techniques. Actively visualize the desired location while moving through the dream. Use voice commands for the holodeck concept, or explore other methods like portals, focusing on engaging the memory of the desired scene. Get the scene right, ideally somewhere with a computer, then summon data.
use a voice command or actively trigger those data schemas, thinking about his appearance and characteristics.
Right. And based on that spontaneous typing incident, the very first thing to do when he appears is address that directly. Ask him about the email thing and what he was doing typing in the camera app.
That interaction is a priority now.
Yes. And I need to be hyper-aware during that conversation, using that System 2 thinking and narration not just to control the dream, but to mentally commit his explanation to memory. Maybe even narrate it back to myself in the dream to help solidify it, avoiding the trap of trying to write it down. Then, if the conversation about that spontaneous event is complete, proceed with teaching VIM and computer basics.
Okay. This involves starting with the fundamentals, showing him the keyboard and mouse layout, explaining the concept of translating visual information to muscle memory.
Expecting data's processing speed might make him incredibly fast at this.
Right, and demonstrating basic functions like using the shift key for capital letters and symbols.
And the key test, the objective measure of potential progress, will be having him attempt the nitrotype.com typing test. I'll need to describe the steps, maybe even use a voice command to shortcut things like account creation to maximize dream time.
And while he's attempting the test, the focus will be on observing everything. How does the dream mind model the website? Is the text clear? How accurately does the dream generate the WPM output? And most importantly, observing data's process, does he struggle? Make errors? Is he instantly proficient?
All of this needs to happen while maintaining constant narration. Talking out loud, describing the process, describing my observations of data, maybe even explaining to data why I'm narrating, to maintain logical consistency in this generated reality. It's a multitasking cognitive exercise for sure.
Beyond the specific Vim Nitro type goal, you've outlined a number of broader, fascinating future goals for interacting with data in dreams, stemming from that initial motivation.
Oh, absolutely. Once the technical hurdle is explored, there are so many philosophical discussions I'd love to have with him. What it's like to access information at a low level, how he internally experiences computation or consciousness, how his understanding of human dreaming compares to his own experiences or the holodeck, his thoughts on the mind as an advanced computer system, just so many things.
Exploring his origins and construction is another compelling avenue, potentially discussing neural networks with Noonien Soong, if he appeared, or even witnessing the emotion chip installation or reprogramming within the dream, asking him specific questions about his creation.
And simply exploring the enterprise itself with him as a guide. Having data show me around the ship, seeing how the dream mind models that familiar yet unknown environment, how the enterprise computers are used from a first-person perspective. You mentioned the Realm of Fear episode as inspiration for experiencing transporting in a dream.
That visceral feeling of being dematerialized and rematerialized.
Yeah, and the possibility of meeting other characters, like seeking out Geordie LaForge to ask him questions about data, maybe gaining a different perspective within the dream narrative.
So many potential avenues.
Ultimately, all these goals, from the focused Vim lesson to the broad philosophical questions and explorations, are driven by that core motivation. Having fun, engaging with a character I deeply admire, and simultaneously using this unique project as a lens to explore the journey of learning, the challenges of control, and fundamentally to see what my own mind is capable of creating and modeling in this fascinating internal reality.
It's a layered quest, part technical experiment, part character study, and part deep dive into your own consciousness and its generative power.
And what's key, I think, is that this isn't just relevant to someone with a specific Star Trek goal or an experienced lucid dreamer. The journey you've recounted, with its successes, failures, bizarre twists, it illustrates aspects of the dreaming mind that are universal.
Absolutely. Everyone dreams. The creativity, the unexpected leaps in logic, the spontaneous generation of detailed but sometimes nonsensical elements, the struggle for control and memory. These are inherent features, to varying degrees, of all our dreaming minds.
Exactly. Your personal exploration highlights the potential for anyone to delve into their own internal world through practices like lucid dreaming. It offers a fascinating frontier for self-discovery and gaining a deeper understanding of how our consciousness generates our perceived reality.
And the aha moments you've shared, the surprising realism of Data asking which switch, the sheer absurdity and spontaneity of him typing on the camera app interface, the simple but profoundly frustrating mistake of trying to write down notes that vanish.
Right.
These are vivid examples of the unexpected insights our minds offer when generating reality, even a dream reality.
They serve as powerful reminders that our internal landscape is capable of generating incredible complexity, surprising fidelity, and utterly unpredictable behavior, often all at once.
It's tough. You mentioned earlier updates where I learned the hard way about dream permanence.
Right, trying to take notes or use Google Drive in the dream.
Yeah. That was a classic facepalm moment upon waking. I was lucid, trying to be methodical, thinking, I got to remember this detail, I'll just jot it down, or save this insight to the cloud.
Yeah.
Forgetting completely that dream writing is notoriously unstable and vanishes, and there is no dream Google Drive that persists. Wasted good lucid time trying to use tools that just don't work like that.
It really highlights how easily dream logic, or illogic, can override your waking knowledge, even when you know you're dreaming. You need techniques to anchor yourself.
Definitely. Strong intention helps, but as we saw, it's not always enough. What I found really crucial is talking out loud. Narrating.
Narrating within the dream.
Yeah. Saying my actions, my goals, what I'm seeing out loud, it seems to reinforce the conscious awareness, keeps me grounded. It's like giving a running commentary to the dream engine, helping it and me stay focused. And instead of relying on phantom notes, I have to consciously process and understand things deeply in the moment they happen, hoping that engagement makes them stick for waking recall.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds a bit like what some lucid dreaming researchers talk about, like Daniel Love's idea of keeping the noetic observational window open or doing pre-flight checks, actively engaging those higher cognitive functions while dreaming.
Exactly. Doing things like counting your fingers, they're usually messed up in dreams, or pushing your hand through your palm, or just mentally reviewing, okay, I'm dreaming, what are my goals, what are the rules here? It's about deliberately keeping the logical part of your brain switched on against the dream's natural tendency to just wander off into weirdness.
And you mentioned refining your approach to remembering the dream itself afterwards.
Yeah, I realized trying to frantically memorize every little detail during the dream was actually pulling me out of the experience. It felt like work. Now I focus more on just being fully present, really understanding what's happening as it unfolds, soaking in the weirdness, the sequence, the feeling of it all. That deep engagement in the moment seems to naturally improve recall later, more than forced memorization ever did, and it's more enjoyable.
Takes the pressure off, lets you just experience it. So thinking about that main attempt and other experiences you've had, what's the overall picture emerging about how your mind models complex stuff in dreams? Characters, objects, tech.
It's like watching a simulation engine that's incredibly powerful, but also kind of buggy and inconsistent. Take character modeling, like Data. We saw his appearance can blend or take time to resolve, like that time he looked a bit like Robin Williams initially. Suggest the mind pulls from related schemas, maybe?
Could be. But then his personality often seems spot on, right? Drawing from your deep knowledge. You mentioned him reacting skeptically to the cue-snapping idea or being supportive when you admitted a flaw. Those felt very true to the character.
Exactly. Those moments feel like the subconscious perfectly accessing and running the core personality model. It knows how Data should react. But then his actions can be totally off-script or illogical for the goal, like spontaneously typing into a camera app when we're supposed to be doing VIM, or making typos before I taught him anything, or using a mouse in the recent attempt.
So the mind knows Data uses computers, but defaults to generic computer use actions typing mouse instead of the specific unusual VIM commands model you're trying to impose.
It feels like that, like the default programming overrides the custom request, unless you're really, really hammering it home. It takes the easiest path based on common associations.
And we see similar inconsistencies with objects and environments. That keyboard morphing is the prime example of weird object rendering and interaction.
Oh, yeah. Or those random visual filters, the welding helmet effect, the sunglasses overlay just appearing for no reason, shows the mind can do visual processing effects, but applies them bizarrely.
Yet contrast that with the AI world transition. seamless global scene change. Or other times you've used portals or Star Trek transporters to move around, which can be instant and smooth.
Right, and it can generate complex, recognizable interfaces, too. I've seen things like the Nitro-type website rendered before. In the recent dream, it made a convincing AI prompt. Even with its weird limits and outputs, it even modeled NeoVim once, which I don't even use.
So it's pulling from this vast database character traits, website design, software concepts, even niche ones, and trying to stitch it all together into an interactive world. But the sketching is sometimes messy.
Very messy. It's like a huge, chaotic library of assets it's trying to compile in real time.
And even the basic physics seem inconsistent. You mentioned feeling friction, trying to snap like Q.
Yeah, it wasn't effortless. Took multiple tries. Not very omnipotent feeling.
While other reality changes are instant. And remember that time summoning people in a busy scene failed, and they came out flat.
Oh yeah, the flat people. Like 2D cutouts stuck mid-render. But doing a similar summon later in a quiet scene worked perfectly. Full 3D interactive characters. Suggests maybe the environment's complexity or my own mental state affects the simulation's processing power.
Could be. It all points to this incredibly complex dynamic simulation, but one running on biological hardware with its own rules, glitches, and variable performance. And you had that one instance where it answered illogically.
Yeah, that was wild. I asked it if my voice command earlier, the one that summoned the wrong person, had been misrecognized. Now, logically, in a dream, my commands are intention-based. They shouldn't be misrecognized, like audio input. But I asked, looked at my hand, and bright green flash. Yes.
So the dream used its own communication system to confirm something that violates the dream's own internal logic.
Exactly. It shows it can model communication, provide answers, but the underlying logic isn't always sound, even by dream standards. It was like, yes, I misheard your intention, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
Fascinatingly flawed.
So, stepping back from all these experiences over the past year, what are the big takeaways? What have this whole Data Dream project really shown you, even if the VIM lesson itself is pending?
Well, it's undeniably shown the mind's incredible power to generate these deeply detailed, interactive realities. It's a simulation engine pulling on everything I know, characters, places, tech concepts. But it's also shown how bizarre and unpredictable that engine is. Dream logic is its own thing. Control is slippery. The right outcome, based on my intention, can get completely derailed by weird associations, glitches, unexpected inputs from the dream itself, like that photo.
It really paints a picture of dreams as this powerful, complex biological computer, right? Constantly running simulations. And maybe the real value isn't just judging its success at a task, but observing how it simulates. The quirks, the errors, the we're processing that's the interesting data.
Exactly. The wrongness is often the most revealing part. The detours aren't failures. They're insights into how the mind works. And maybe, like we touched on, the ultimate point isn't just ticking the box .data VIM.
Maybe the real goal, the deeper value, is using that specific, slightly absurd framework, teaching an Android VIM in a dream, as a structured way to probe and understand your own dreaming mind, its capabilities, its limits, its baffling creativity. Data becomes this constant, this lens through which you observe the wild variability of your internal simulation engine.
That feels very true now. The goal gives it structure, but the real discovery happens along the way, in the unexpected twists and turns the dream takes and what they reveal about the simulator itself.
So with all that learned, what's the plan for future attempts? How are you adjusting the approach?
We'll definitely start it with narration right away, consciously talking through intentions, actions, observations to try and keep things more coherent, more grounded.
Makes sense.
And I want to follow up on that previous dream where Data explained his weird editing by saying he was sending an email to fit in. I want to ask him about that specifically, reminding him of that context, see if I can get a more consistent or insightful response this time with more focus.
Okay. And for the VIM teaching itself?
I'm thinking focus more directly on the keyboard, the physical layout, the muscle memory aspect, maybe even bypass the computer screen simulation if it keeps being glitchy. Work with whatever element feels most stable in the dream. Except the rendering might be weird.
Adapt to the environment.
Yeah.
And you mentioned being open to teleporting if the starting location isn't great.
Yeah, if I find myself in, like, that store, again, maybe try a Star Trek transporter effect, visualize the Relics episode effect, maybe to jump to a better setting. But also, sometimes working with the weird scene yields interesting results too, so stay open to that. Objectively decide if a distraction looks like a useful insight or just noise.
Right, that conscious evaluation of the detours.
Exactly. So it's a mix. Focused intention, narration for logic, being present, accepting dream weirdness, but also trying to guide it, and actively observing and learning from everything that happens. And, doing things like this deep dive, revisiting the goals, talking it through that helps seed the intention for the next attempt, too.
It really is like an ongoing research project, constantly refining the method based on the data coming back from the simulator.
Yeah, it feels less like trying to win a game and more like exploring a really strange, really powerful piece of internal technology with data as my often unpredictable guide.
Which leads perfectly into a final thought, maybe something for you to chew on. Given everything we've discussed, this incredible power of your mind to generate these complex, interactive, sometimes character-consistent, sometimes bafflingly weird simulations, what does that suggest about our cognitive capabilities more broadly, the ones we might not even be aware of?
You mean the capabilities running even when we're awake?
Exactly. If the mind can do this in dreams, how else might it be constantly modeling reality, simulating people based on our knowledge of them, running scenarios, generating internal interactions, maybe in subtle ways that underpin our waking thoughts and feelings, ways we haven't fully grasped yet?
Wow. Yeah, that's a big thought. The idea that this isn't just a sleep mode feature, but that this simulation engine is always running, just manifesting differently depending on our state of consciousness.
It definitely adds another dimension to thinking about what our minds are actually doing, doesn't it?
It really does. A lot to consider there.
Well, this has been another fascinating deep dive into the Data Dream project. Even without the final VIM lesson checked off, the journey itself is clearly yielding some incredibly rich, profound insights into the mind's strange and wonderful ways.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of just how deep those subconscious capabilities go. Constantly modeling, generating, simulating, like a dream running under the surface. Turns out, yeah, trying to teach Data VIM is maybe less about the VIM and more about the trying and what happens when you do.
Thank you again for sharing all these updates, experiences, and your really insightful reflections with us. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring.
Will do. Keep diving deep.